This is a video on section 4 for the FSA pathway, both 1 and 2. And you've got Steve Millis here and Tony Holes. Again, just a reminder, make sure you've got the latest document, assessment document, downloaded from the eLearn platform. Make sure you read the instructions if there are any in the red tabs in each part. And if you're still stuck, make sure you refer to the examples and the learner guide as well for further information. So let's have a look at this, Tony. This top part here, the condition report, we'll make a separate video on this, hey, just when we get to it. But there's already a hyperlink put in there, and it just takes you to the condition report, which is actually being built, or part of it is being built on the side here with some preset instructions into the spreadsheet. So we'll do a separate video on that, so that's clear. And it's the same with the disparity report at the bottom here. If you're doing pathway 2, which is the diploma students, you must do a disparity report. And this hyperlink here just takes you to that disparity report. And we'll do a separate video on that as well. So Tony, the AFSS. What do we need there? We need a completed AFSS by you, the student. So you can supply one that you've actually completed and submitted for this building. If you weren't the one that endorsed that measure for that building, because you don't have to have done the inspection for the sake of this assessment task, you can use somebody else's maintenance records or a building perhaps that you don't look after. So in that case, you must supply an AFSS that you would submit. So it's like a simulated one that you would submit. You may not have a accreditation number yet, so you can leave that blank, but it must have your details, your name and signature on that statement.
Yeah, it should be the current statement as well. This statement is legal under the Fire Safety Regulation, New South Wales, and they change from time to time. But there is a brand new version out. It's not brand new, but it's a recently updated version. And it just gives us the evidence that somebody can complete, and not just the measure, but the whole report. The details of the building and so forth are in there as well. That's why you're doing the course. That's the whole purpose of the assessment, is to be able to complete one of those forms. So yeah, we do need evidence, whether it's one that you're actually submitting or not. We do need evidence that you can complete one of those forms.
Right. Then image of the front of the building. This is really, we need evidence that you were there. Part of the requirements or the scope that's outlined by the FPA says you must go to site. You can't rely on somebody else's inspection. You must go to site. And that's really why we need that. Now, sometimes you might have an image of the front of the building in part of your other record keeping. And by the way, this is where these hyperlinks are becoming important, because we want to just click on this link and it take us straight to the AFSS. Otherwise, we could be looking through, 30, 40 documents that you've uploaded into OneDrive. So same with the image of the front of the building. If you have an image, and it might be on your records from Uptick or Simpro or Axiom's software that you're using, just tell us where in that record keeping it is. So if it's on page 3, just say page 3 of records, so that myself or Tony, we can click on that and we can find what you're referring to. Same with the schedule. We need a fire safety schedule. Sometimes that might be in a DA, or it might be in an OC or somewhere. If it's not clear, let us know where it is. So create a hyperlink directly to the schedule if you have it. If it's in another bunch of documents, then just tell us where to look, what page to look on, because often this is something that I'm finding I'm getting 30, 40 pages, sometimes 100-page FERs and whatnot. And it just is taking me so much longer to get a result back to you for an assessment because I just can't find the information that you're referring to.
The best one to use there is the council send out a notice for the assessment to be completed. So they need to provide you with that schedule in that notice. So oftentimes you'll get the schedule from there.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm getting people, and this is common again, saying they don't have a schedule. And
well, if there's no schedule, there's no requirement for the AFSS. So that's also in the regulation that the council only needs to send or required to get an AFSS from buildings that have a fire safety schedule.
yeah. So if council can't supply the schedule with that, then perhaps you've got with the request for the statement, then I guess you can then go back to council and request that they supply the schedule. Yeah. Now, there's also the new schedule that must be used. So any council that's making minor changes or reissuing a schedule must use that new schedule template. And the good thing about that is there's instructions for whoever's going to complete that on how to complete it. And the FPA has actually put out an example on what an accurately completed schedule would look like, including any FERs and whatnot on different measures, and including different years of standards applicable to different parts of the building. So that's a pretty handy document to get hold of. I'll supply a copy in the training as well. And I guess that goes back to what we spoke about in the earlier sections. Down here, if you've got a schedule, that's great. They're not always complete though. So having more information that you've gathered up here in these other sections could help you make a determination in section 3, a more specific determination on the performance requirements, including BCA parts, years, and so on. Anything else that you can think of to add to that part there, Tony? Basically, you need to get it. you need to supply a link to the schedule.
Yeah, so I guess the schedule is just a list of fire safety measures that are relevant to the building.
Yeah.
And that happens at the DA process. There must be one. And we just need a copy of that. It doesn't necessarily have, it can be something older. And I guess one of the, it's very common for you to go and find the schedule's incorrect or whatever. Don't care whether the schedule is correct or incorrect. What you do about that is all in the fire safety regulation. There's processes to go through to change your schedule. That's not what this is really all about. We're only using the schedule as evidence that you to validate, as Steve said, section 3. And then if the schedule doesn't have the dates on it, then we say section 3's got to have the dates on it, and that enables you to then determine the age of the building, and kind of all ties together.
Yeah.
You go through it bit by bit.
Yeah, so if the schedule's not complete, using other evidence to make a determination up here in section 3. And then the evacuation plan. So we need you to supply an image of the evacuation plan, create a hyperlink there so we can find it. There's also some other additional documents here. Now, usually for most measures, there is going to be some sort of equipment schedule. But down here, you're getting more into, I guess, more complex measures, would you say, Tony, like HVAC and
Yeah, so yeah, HVAC and fire indicating panels and so forth, system interface diagrams and functionality charts, I believe are vital in the decision-making process. There's way too much hearsay going on where we're using somebody's word that the air conditioning shutting down at the right time, or this damper's opening, or this damper's closing. And to me, that's just not good enough. I know that we may have multiple trades on site and we're using each other, other services at the same time. But unless we can come back to a piece of paper that says that the air conditioning shuts down at the right time, this is where you create your own functionality chart based on performance or actuals. You don't have to have the design functionality chart. It's a very simple document to create, and it's really important. And I would certainly expect that of anybody who did fire indicator or smoke detection systems, fire indicating panels and so forth. As evidence that that the work was done.
Yeah. And I guess similar for equipment schedules, what you need to know what type of equipment should be in which location. You start to drill down into specification sheets even further with a lot of HVAC. What are the specs of specific fans in certain locations?
Yeah. And I think schedules for assessors are much more important than test and inspect work. And this is where we need to change our hat and move into the assessor's hat, because if you've got a fire door schedule, for example, then and you're trying to determine whether the system's capable of performing, if you don't have a tag on a door, which is often the case, at least one door in a building, the door doesn't need to be replaced. It needs to be validated as being a fire door with a particular rating. That can be done via the schedule. And the more during the test and inspect, or the more we insist on building owners developing these schedules, or having you develop these schedules, the better and easier it's going to be in the future for you to endorse measures. Because if in the case of a fire door schedule, it should tell you if it's per 1905.1, it should tell you the type of hardware that's on the door. It validates that. It's done very poorly when we're inspecting testing doors. It should validate the door and the rating of the door. And then also where the doors are. Like, how do you determine whether you've got every door and you've looked at every door? And there's lots of places and nooks and crannies within buildings where there's fire doors. And what's the purpose of the door? Is it, part of a horizontal egress path? Is it part of a fire stair? What type of signage does it should have on it, and so forth? And it relates directly to fans and other parts of measures as well, where we can identify, and the unit of competency requires us, and we'll talk more about this in section 6, Steve, requires somebody to be able to identify a particular asset or item based on either a plan or a schedule.
Yeah.
And that's the big mistake that people are making in section 6, is that we need that information because of the unit of competency. And at the end of the day, it just makes so much sense, especially for dampers and things like that. Like, if you've got a multi-story high-rise building and you don't have a plan or a schedule of some kind telling you how many dampers they are, what type they are, what FRL it is, then really, how can the work be done to any reasonable standard?
Yeah.
And look, to some extent, inspection checklists or asset registers can be used for that, but it's created by somebody who's walked around and done the inspection, and it's not really valid or viable. There's no specification attached to it. It's just basically what it is, and it doesn't validate that that's all there is.
Yeah.
Look, I've done it myself. I've been here and done that. I've missed assets in buildings because I just didn't have access to that particular area when I first walked around.
Yeah.
Um,
And
things get,
also, you know, the buildings get modified over time. So if you're
yeah,
coming in 20 years after construction, and you may not be aware of modifications that the building owners made without DAs, or
yeah,
or you know, moved internal walls and knocked walls out. So
yeah,
it's moving away from just inspecting what's there to verifying what should be there
yeah.
in the assessment process.
And let's face it, AS 1851 is fast becoming a legal document, and in almost all of the measures, it requires you to create a schedule if there's not one there, especially for valves and
Yeah.
gauges and stuff like that with hydrants and wet systems. Um,
Yeah.
even smoke detectors and stuff like that. Like, where are they? Emergency lights, where are they?
Mm. Even in 1851 for fire seals, the very first thing on the checklist is reference plans.
Yep.
So pretty hard. It's going to
Yep.
be pretty hard to comply to just 1851 at the inspect and test level without solid baseline data in the form of a plan. I mean, that's jumping ahead a little bit, but
Yeah, look,
it's
I
all
completely
tying
agree.
together.
I think it's got to be one or the other, Steve. I think you either need a plan or an accurate schedule, something that's been created by somebody and done the work.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah,
either
so
verifiable baseline data from the installation and or design, or established data that's been based on a process.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right.